The clothes the characters are wearing should absolutely affect how the NPCs that they interact with treat them and how they react to them. If you're playing a Ptolus campaign, there's even areas in the city that specify if you're not wearing a certain outfit, you're not going to be admitted. There's also things that specify you're not allowed to carry weapons in a certain areas. There's also things that say specifically, if you're dressed like an adventurer, people are not going to like you. So the clothes that the PCs are wearing should absolutely change how people interact with them. You know this is true in the real world. Why would it be any different in the fantasy world, right? Now, granted, in the real world, it's not very common that you see somebody walking around in full plate mail with 2 swords strapped to their sides and, a longbow in their back. If there is, I'd really question the company that you keep and where you're hanging out. Maybe you work for a Renaissance fair. But in the fantasy world, as in the real world, if in the real world you're dressed in a 3-piece suit, looking great, just get out of a Mercedes, people are going to treat that person differently than the guy that's wearing a scrubby overcoat that has hair all the way down to his waist. I'm not here to talk about whether that's right or not. I'm just here to tell you that it's absolutely true in the real world, and it should be true in your fantasy world. One of the things that I have stressed with my characters in our Ptolus campaign is how your characters dress and how they present themselves will absolutely change the interaction that you have with NPCs. Even down to sometimes the prices that they're going to pay for something, and just because they're dressed well doesn't always mean that they're going to be charged more. In fact, quite the opposite a lot of times. That if you are seen as a wealthy individual that's going to bring in a lot of business, there's a chance you're actually going to pay less because they're going to want to keep those people happy. If you're dressed regally in a noble's outfit, there's a good chance that the shopkeepers that you're interacting with are going to be nicer to you, are going to treat you better. Same goes for if they're walking around in full plate mail with all of their weapons and armaments and backpacks and everything on. There's parts of the city, Delver Square and the Ghostly Minstrel are a perfect example of this, that's totally the norm, right? But if you go over into the Guildsman District, if you get into the nicer parts of Old Town, and you won't even be allowed into the Nobles District if you're dressed like that, and especially if you don't have the right paperwork. A lot of narrators don't think about this stuff, and I get it. You've got 1,000 other things going on. Focusing on what your PCs are wearing at any given time is probably not at the forefront of your mind. But this is a really fun role-playing opportunity, and it's really easy to include. Not to mention, if you're looking for an area that you want your characters to have to burn a little bit of resources, then having them have to buy nicer clothes or even different weapons and armor to wear around town, this is a great place to do that. I'll call out Barash in the Calling campaign. He has incredibly nice full plate armor, but clunking around in that as he's walking through the main parts of the city is incredibly cumbersome. So he actually purchased different armor to wear that's more subtle, that keeps things hidden, and makes it a little less obvious that he's a Delver. I've absolutely rewarded that from a role-playing perspective to make sure that he knows people are treating him differently based on how he's dressed. Vo, Talon, several of the other characters in there have gone to expensive and elaborate parties at House Cath, at Castle Shard, even at the Church of Lothian, the gigantic Saint Chapel over in the Temple District. They had to dress differently when they went to those things. They actually took the time to go to, I think, Saks, if you pronounce that right, to have Vo a custom dress made, right? Talon had to go and get custom outfitted and tailored outfits so that they could go to these incredibly expensive parties to hobnob with these people. If you're meeting with important NPCs and you're dressed scrubby, well, then there's a good chance they're not going to like you. They're automatically going to be at a disadvantage in the diplomacy world. And this is something that honestly I find really fun. It's also can be a positive for them if a Dragonborn is walking through Ptolus in full plate armor with both of his incredibly ornate magical swords on his hips. There's a much lower chance that a group of street toughs are going to decide to jump him, right? But the flip side of that is also true. If you're dressed very nicely and you're wandering through the Warrens, there's a good chance you're gonna get jumped, right? These are all things that you want to think about, not just in a Ptolus campaign. Obviously, I mostly talk about Ptolus, but really wherever your characters go, if maybe a certain area doesn't like adventurers or delvers or whatever you wind up calling them, people in full armor and full weapons, right? People will treat them differently. Bring that in as a role-playing sector because it's just a lot of fun. It's something really simple that you can add in. Automatically, you can influence an NPC's interactions just based on the clothes that you're wearing or the weapons that you are showing. Like I said, this is something that's been really fun for me. I let my players know about this before we even started the campaign because I always wanted to make sure that those choices changed how people interacted with them, right? One of the other most popular things in our Ptolus game is the Hat of Disguise, and we use it just constantly. Almost all of the characters in the calling have hats of disguise. That might seem like overkill, it might seem unrealistic, but they spent the money to order them custom from the Dreaming Apothecary, and they utilize them because they have made a lot of people mad. They've made a lot of very powerful enemies. So just walking around town as themselves, there's a greater chance that they're going to get attacked. Now, obviously, a hat of disguise is not perfect. True seeing can see right through a disguise, and all kinds of divination magic allow you to track people. So this isn't a get out of jail free card because when you make more powerful people mad, they've got more resources at their disposal. The characters have also gone so far as to use an actual disguise kit to alter their appearance with makeup, wigs, fake beards, things like that. And then also use the Hat of Disguise on top of that so that even if somebody could see through the illusion, they would see somebody that looks different even underneath that. So I want you to think about these things and to reward those if your characters take the time, or players take the time for their characters, to do these role-playing things. Make sure that you reward those, and maybe if you've never done this before, introduce this into your game and let me know what you think and if it had any impact, if it was good or bad. Something else, the last thing that I'll say is, if they are coming up out of the sewers and coming out of combat, there is a good chance that they stink, that they are covered in gross, yucky stuff. And again, if they just walk into the ghostly minstrel and they just walked out of the sewers without using prestidigitation or, washing themselves off in any way, then this should absolutely affect the way that they interact. One of the coolest fights that I've detailed, if you watch one of my other videos, was the group was fighting a Zaug, and well, it blew up. I'll just say that, right? When it blew up, I went into exquisite detail about the amount of gore that covered the characters. They had to make sure that they cleaned up before going into the Ghostly Minstrel or going to other meetings. Barash actually made it a point not to clean up before going to a certain meeting because he wanted to allow the gore to actually change the interaction with the NPC. And absolutely, I made sure that we played that up and we took that into account. So add this to your game. Let me know down in the comments below if you already do this, if you've never thought about it. Join us over on our Ptolus Discord, ring the tolling bell, and subscribe, all the YouTube crap. I hate saying that stuff, but if it helps, then it helps. Otherwise, until next time, stay out of the shadow of the Spire.